It's me, Marianne Taylor, aka the House Detective. If you're new here, this is my Detective Diaries where I take you through my top 5 most interesting, unusual, quirky, cool finds from the last 2 weeks of my house detective research. So I'm an architectural historian. I research the history of houses and buildings for my business. So what have I got for you today? Well, we are going to talk about St Kilda in Brisbane. That's right, not Melbourne, Brisbane. I'm also going to talk about I want to say a fantastic book. It's pretty grim, but it's also very interesting, and it delves into definitely a lesser known area of our convict history, and that is the story of Convict Orphans. Absolutely heartbreaking, but also absolutely fascinating. I'm also going to be talking about the hunt for a photograph of a house that was on Brunswick Street in Fortitude Valley. It's been demolished, but I'm trying to find a photograph of it. So we're talking about how tricky that's been, and then I will be sharing with you some of the incredible photos of old Brunswick Street and old Bowen Terrace that I have come across in the process of looking for that photograph. Incredible shots of before the Story Bridge was built and some of the buildings that were located near where the northern approach to the Story Bridge is. Fabulous. I'll also be talking about the history of a house at Annerley and sharing a story connected to the house relating to a barbecue. Seriously, the random stuff I come across when researching houses. You won't believe this story. Anyway, stick around for that. At the end of last year, I was engaged to research a building on Brunswick Street. It is currently used by Third Space, which is a homeless support centre, and I actually volunteer there. Fantastic organisation. And anyway, it is their 50th anniversary this year. They were established in 1975 in a different building in Brisbane, and this building on Brunswick Street was purpose built for them under a Commonwealth grant in the year of homelessness, which was 1987. So I'm helping them to put together a little bit of a history and to collect some photographs that capture the story of this organisation and the building that they're now in. One of the things I have been trying to work out is what was actually on the site before the current building was built there. So I started by looking at aerial photographs, and I can see what looks like quite a large residence was on the site right up until the 1980s. So it was likely demolished to make way for the current building. And then I set about trying to actually establish firstly what this house was and who lived there, but also to try and find a photograph of it. When I was looking for old photographs of the building at 505 Brunswick Street, so the property is located between Bowen Terrace and Brunswick Street. So I started to think, okay, well, maybe if I can get some photos taken of the cliff tops there, then it might capture this building in the background because it was quite a tall building, as I mentioned. Then it occurred to me that heaps and heaps and heaps of photographs were taken of the Story Bridge during and after construction. So I thought maybe, just maybe, it has been captured in the background as some of these snaps. So I managed to uncover a ton of fantastic photographs of the Story Bridge, and I actually mentioned in the previous video the book that I just got on the Story Bridge, so there were some really cool photos in there as well. Unfortunately, I only managed to find one in which the house I'm looking for was captured, and it was kind of just the little corner of the roof with one of the chimneys showing, so it wasn't very useful, but I haven't given up. I'll keep searching. But anyway, I did in the process uncover a heap of fantastic photos of this area of what is now Fortitude Valley, and I just thought I would share some of them here. Now, it's also shown on an old sewerage plan, and it is referred to in the post office directory. So post office directories are like, if you're as old as me, you'll remember the white pages. These were early versions of the white pages, basically a postal directory that listed all the streets in Brisbane and then listed the residents in order of the house. So they're very useful for looking at when people lived in a house and also when houses first appeared on a street. So I was looking at the Brunswick Street listings in various post office directories, so they were issued annually and a number of them survive. And one name that seems to have been attached to this property was Esram Villa. And that gives me then a little bit of a lead to follow to see if I can uncover some old photographs of this villa. Now, I haven't finished the research into this, so I will keep going and let you know what I uncover and if I manage to find a photograph of it, because at this stage, all I've managed to be able to do is to find this kind of blurry, dark blotches in the background of other photographs, so no luck yet. But it does look like, from what I have been able to make out, it does look like it was quite a grand two-story residence with even dormer windows, which would make it a three-story house. Looks very unusual for early Brisbane, and it must have been quite an impressive house. So firstly, I'm thinking, you know, who was this built for and what was its story? And also, it seems like it's a bit of a tragedy that it was demolished, but it's hard to get upset about a single residence for one family being demolished to make way for this amazing facility that we now have that looks after the welfare in so many ways of Brisbane's homeless people. So in this case, I won't get too upset about a building being demolished. I haven't given up on finding a photograph of this building or the back of this building, so I will keep going. In the process of looking for photographs of 505 Brunswick Street, as I mentioned, I have actually accidentally uncovered all these fabulous photographs of this area of Brunswick Street and Bowen Terrace on the top of the cliffs there, just on the eastern side of the Story Bridge. One of the reasons it's actually quite hard to find photographs of Bowen Terrace and Brunswick Street looking that way from the river is that all the photographs were taken from Bowen Terrace. So it's the top of the cliffs, they're just above Howard Smith Wharves, and so most photographs are taken from that point looking out at Brisbane CBD, and then after the bridge was built looking out at the bridge and Kangaroo Point in the background. So it's actually quite rare to find photographs looking the other way, as I'm discovering. So I was very excited to uncover some of these, and some of the fantastic photographs that I've uncovered are of lost buildings, so buildings that are no longer there, and some of them were actually demolished to make way for the approach to the Story Bridge. So there's a number of photographs taken during the construction of the Story Bridge or shortly before or shortly afterwards that actually capture some incredible buildings. Most of them were on Bowen Terrace. One of the most impressive places, and I have never heard of this building or seen photographs of it, it was called Gladstone Place, and it was just so massive, this building, and so stunning, and yeah, it was absolutely gorgeous from the front. Very impressive building. So I haven't had time to look into the history of this building as much as I really wanted to find out as soon as I saw a photograph of it. But if any of you want to have a look into its history, I'd be very grateful. So Gladstone Place it was called, and it was on Bowen Terrace, just kind of close to where the Kent Place fire station is now. There was also a brewery there at one stage, and I suspect, I haven't looked into this yet either, what used to be Curfew Street was renamed Malt Street, which it remains today, and I'm thinking maybe that's a connection to the brewery that was there. I think it was Balimba Brewery, don't quote me on that. But anyway, I digress. But anyway, I went down this massive rabbit hole of finding all these fantastic photos. I also found some photographs of some of the old houses that have subsequently been demolished to make way for other buildings, commercial buildings and other things like that in the vicinity. But I also, and this is the problem with my job, I go looking for one thing and then I find this thing and then I find this thing, and there's all these other tangents that I want to go off on, and I often don't have the time, unfortunately. I bookmark a lot of stuff or add it to future YouTube episodes folder. So in this case I didn't have a time to look into all of these, but it was really interesting. But the coolest thing I found was this massive panorama taken of Brisbane in 1870. So this is only 30 years after Brisbane town was opened up to free settlement after the penal colony was closed. It's, you know, barely just over 10 years since Queensland had actually become a separate colony from New South Wales. So very, very early in the history of Brisbane, and it showcases the buildings that were around at that time, the appearance of the town, the lack of development at that time. And yeah, I was trying to focus, but I couldn't help myself. I had to have a quick look at these amazing collection of photos. So I thought I would just share some of these here with you as well, because I thought you would be interested too. Next up, I'm just going to have a chat with you about this incredible book that I read recently. So it's called Convict Orphans. It's by Lucy Frost, and I'll talk a bit more about it in future. But I actually read a lot of non-fiction books, as you can imagine, and I'm sort of wondering if maybe any of you are interested in me maybe doing quick reviews of them, recommending them, maybe giving them a rating or something like that. I'm also in a couple of book clubs, if you can't tell by what I just said. I love books, and yeah, I just wondered if any of you were interested, whether that's something you'd like me to do. I could just write a quick summary either on my website, I could do a quick video, a quick reel on socials or something like that. So let me know in the comments if that's something you would be interested in, because I often want to talk about what I have just read. This book was one of those examples where I'm like, wow, I wish I knew someone else who had read this that I could discuss it with. So this book is about an aspect of Australia's convict history that I basically knew nothing about, and I'm assuming a lot of people won't know about it either. It's probably not a widely studied area. It's basically about the children of convicts that came to Australia. So this includes both children that were transported with their mothers to Australia when they came over here, kids that were born on the trip out here on the convict ships, children that were born once they were here when the women were still convicts, and then sort of what happened to these children, how they were treated, how they were or not mistreated, how they were looked after or not looked after. So it's a fascinating read into the history of these children. Now, I do have to warn you, it is a pretty grim and sad read as well. It's there's lots of horrible things that happen to these children. I'm sure you can imagine. I don't need to put a trigger warning on here for all the kinds of abuse that they suffered. But having said that, I like to read books like this because I think it's important that we understand the bleaker aspects of our history as well. And I think something like this, where we were founded on convict colonies here in Australia, I think that these children went on to become a part of society. They went on to have their own kids, and some of these people will be our ancestors. So I think it's a really interesting and important area of our history, even though it is quite bleak at times. Having said that, it was quite interesting to actually follow the stories of particular orphans and see what happened to them, and to learn about what basically was a form of slavery here in early Australia. So these children were forced to go into apprenticeships, and they were actually supposed to be given training and instruction and learn skills, but a lot of the times they were just basically used as slaves and free child labour. It's a really, I think, probably unappreciated aspect and unstudied aspect of our history, and I feel so sorry for these children that went through these horrible experiences. I'm starting to waffle. If you're interested in this topic and you're not put off by some of the hard to read parts, then I would highly recommend it. You can still buy it. It's a relatively new book. I imagine it's also in some libraries. I probably should have checked that. I'll follow up after this and put some text on the screen here to let you know what I find out. But anyway, interesting part of our story here in Australia, our European history here in Australia. And as I mentioned, let me know in the comments if reviewing some non-fiction books related to Australian history, houses, that type of thing is something that you would like to see more of on this channel or on my social media. St Kilda in Brisbane. What the heck? So this St Kilda has absolutely nothing to do with the beachside suburb of Melbourne, as far as I can tell. It was actually a residential estate that was subdivided at what is now Annerley. It was subdivided in 1864 and it created around 300 residential sized allotments. It was located between Ipswich Road and Annerley Road. Annerley Road was originally called Boggo Road because Annerley was originally called Boggo, and that's where Boggo Road Jail gets its name as well. It was bordered by Cornwall Street to the north and Lewis Street to the south. Now, you'll often find ads for these old estates in old newspapers online at Trove, and one of my favourite things is just the languages and the descriptions that they used in these advertisements. Like, they did not let the truth get in the way of a poetic and aspirational description of these lands. So I'm just going to read you an excerpt from one of these advertising blurbs. The magnificent prospect obtainable from the heights of St Kilda. Embraced in the lands, having access to the old Ipswich Road may be safely stated as unsurpassed in beauty and extent of scenery for miles in or about the city, commanding a view of the Valley of Brisbane, embracing the most interesting part of the river, and the great dividing range forming a background to the landscape, pronounces this portion of the estate as all that can be desired in the selection of cottage or villa residence sites. Isn't that amazing? Oh my gosh. It sounds incredible. Often with these estates, they were named after local grand residences. Often the land of these residences had been subdivided to create the estates, and then the estate was given the name of the property. My first suspicion was that that is what had happened here. I'm not actually sure. I couldn't find reference to any St Kilda in what is now the Annerley area. So not sure what the source of the name was. Maybe it had meaning to the property developers at the time rather than being connected to an old house. When I look at a residential estate, I also often look at the name of the streets because sometimes there's a theme to them. Often they're connected to the name of the estate or something like that. In this case, the names of the streets in the St Kilda estate are not connected to St Kilda as far as I can tell, but they are the names of some prominent politicians and governors. So you've got Herbert Street, Torrens Street, Palmerston Street, all well-known politicians, and Lord Palmerston was the Prime Minister of the UK. That gives a bit of a background of the history of the names of the streets. There was also Bowen Street, and that was changed to Carville Street. There was also Short Street, and that was changed to Laurier Street. Now, this was probably done during the 1930s. Brisbane City Council went about renaming streets that were duplicated a number of times across the city. So really common street names like Short Street, like Bowen Street, Mary Street, Church Street, Railway Street, that kind of thing. So I suspect that they've been renamed around that time. And today, the only remnant of this estate, other than the names of those politicians and governors, is St Kilda Place. But this is actually a little short laneway, effectively, on the opposite side of Ipswich Road. So there you go, a very brief look into Brisbane's St Kilda. I came across the St Kilda estate when I was researching a house at Annerley. So this house had actually been built on land that was part of the St Kilda estate. So the block was one of those 300 subdivisions that formed the St Kilda estate. Now, this land had been purchased by a gentleman called James Cockerell in 1865. He bought 4 adjacent allotments. James Cockerell also owned land at Nerang, and this is where an interesting barbecue story comes into it. So when I was researching his name in the old newspapers, this article popped up where he was basically disputing someone's claim that they had roasted the first bullock in Queensland, the first whole bullock in Queensland. So in this letter to the newspaper, James is saying that the first bullock to be roasted whole happened in celebration of Queen Victoria's Silver Jubilee in 1887, and he had supplied the bullock. So this is the kind of random story that I come across when I'm researching houses. So I had a bit of a giggle to myself, and first I was thinking, how did they even logistically do that? Like, a whole bullock is absolutely massive. I'm thinking, was there a rotisserie involved? Were they roasting it on an open fire? No idea. But apparently it was very well cooked, according to this article. And actually, it's late on a Friday afternoon and I'm kind of getting a little bit hungry thinking about that. But anyway, so he roasted this bullock. Now, he never actually built on this land at Annerley, as far as I can tell. He might have purchased it as a investment property, or since he had cattle, he might have purchased it to graze cattle on when he brought them to Brisbane or something like that. I'm not sure. But I found an interesting transfer stamp on the certificate of title for the land. So when I'm researching a house, I buy the historical certificates of title for the property because these show me the owners of the land over the years. And then I can use those names to search other records like electoral rolls and newspapers to uncover more of the story of the house. So in 1882, James Cockrell actually transferred the property to his nephew. Now, the interesting thing about this transfer stamp is it says John Allen Cockrell, and it lists him on the stamp. It says after his name, a minor of the age of 14 years. So as John was under 21, he was not legally an adult. So although James has transferred the property into his name, it had to be noted on this transfer that he actually wasn't legally of age yet. He was a minor. So I had never come across that on a stamp before. Obviously, normally it's adults that are transferring, selling and buying property. So I thought that was really, really interesting. So long story short-ish, John went on to become a successful grazier and cattle buyer, and he married a woman called Mary Constant Hanton in 1905. He then built a house for them on this land at Annerley. Now, incredibly, this house still survives. I thought when I was looking into this that for sure it would have been demolished by now, but it's still there. It looks like it's been beautifully restored and looked after, and it is absolutely gorgeous. So I just thought I would tell you quickly about this story because I just thought it was so amazing to track the history of the land subdivision through the St Kilda estate and then actually track the construction of this house on some of the subdivisions in that estate. So that's the end of this fortnight's Detective Diaries. I hope you've enjoyed hearing a few snippets from my research and seeing some of the fantastic images that I uncovered. If you wouldn't mind, as always, I'm going to request, pretty please, can you like, subscribe and share? I'm trying very hard to get to 10,000 subscribers this year, but there's no way I will be able to do that without your help in growing my channel, so I'd really appreciate that. It's not just about making money for me though, it's about getting more people interested in Brisbane's history and appreciating our old homes and our architecture, and hopefully once they value it more, we'll be able to protect more of these homes and save them from demolition. So that's kind of the ulterior motive to me wanting to get a lot of subscribers to this channel. So I would love your help if you wouldn't mind. I also just wanted to say a quick thank you for just watching my channel as well. I don't take for granted the subscribers I already have, and I'm so thrilled that people are interested in watching my content and have watched so many of my videos already. So yes, thank you very much, and I will see you next time.